This video was brought to you by Imprint. Brexit continues to be a difficult issue for the Labour Party, as Labour's leader Keir Starmer has to semi-regularly bat away accusations that he secretly wants to take the UK back into the European Union. Nevertheless, in recent weeks, Starmer has seemingly felt more and more confident in talking about his plans for Brexit, making a series of significant statements on the subject in recent weeks, as well as visiting The Hague and being hosted by President Emmanuel Macron in Paris. So in this video, we'll bring you up to speed on the current status of UK-EU relations, and then we'll explore Labour's plans and their viability. If you like our videos and want to support the channel, then check out Too Long, our one-off newspaper. It's a fun collector's item, but it also contains 28 pages of original reporting from us. There's a link to the announcement video and the store in the description, and pre-orders close on October 1st. Let's start by taking a look at the recent developments in UK-EU relations that have taken place under Rishi Sunak's current Conservative government. Now, Sunak's most significant Brexit-related action was the Windsor Framework, which was hailed by Sunak and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen as a new chapter for relations. Essentially, the Windsor Framework was Sunak's deal with the EU aimed at ironing out the post-Brexit trade issues that arose from Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, namely the checking of goods travelling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Later, in June of this year, the UK and EU also signed a Memorandum of Understanding relating to financial services cooperation, which included the establishment of a joint forum to facilitate discussions on voluntary cooperation on regulation and financial service issues. Now, this wasn't the UK committing to align on EU standards, nor was it the EU agreeing to give the UK access to institutions or services. However, it did represent a more conciliatory approach from both the UK and EU, with a greater willingness to be pragmatic on cooperation. Then, in September, it was announced that the UK and EU had reached an agreement in principle for the UK to rejoin Horizon Europe, the EU's €95 billion scientific research initiative. This move was widely welcomed by the scientific community, who'd lost access to the programme when the UK left the EU in early 2020. In addition to rejoining Horizon, the agreement will also see the UK join Copernicus, the European Earth Observation Programme. On top of this, the UK government is also reportedly close to clinching a cooperation deal with Frontex, the EU's border protection agency. Now, Frontex already has working arrangements with 18 non-EU governments, so one with the UK wouldn't exactly be revolutionary, but it would mark yet another move forward towards greater UK-EU cooperation. So, if the current Conservative government were to remain in office longer than they're expected to, it's plausible that this approach of step-by-step selective cooperation may well just continue. But with polling suggesting that Labour should win with a comfortable majority at the next election, likely next year, then perhaps the more important question for the future of UK-EU relations is, what does Labour want to do? Well, Keir Starmer has spent the last few years stating and reiterating that a Labour government would not take the UK back into Europe, nor would it rejoin the single market or customs union. But beyond saying that Labour would make Brexit work, Starmer hasn't actually talked much about what he really wants to do. In a speech in July last year, he did say that Labour would seek a new veterinary agreement with the EU in order to reduce border checks on food and agricultural goods, and come to some sort of agreement on recognition of professional qualifications. But it's only really been relatively recently that Starmer has stated more explicit goals and ambitions than these kind of vague targets. And as I said in the intro, he visited The Hague in the Netherlands last week and vowed to strike a deal with the EU on migration, specifically an EU-wide returns agreement for asylum seekers who come to the UK. Asked whether that would involve some kind of quid pro quo for accepting a certain number of asylum seekers from the EU, Starmer said that would be part of any discussions and negotiations with Europe. Now, in a sign of what next year's election campaign could look like, the Conservatives and Conservative press jumped on this quote, with Home Secretary Suella Braverman tweeting that Labour would make Britain the dumping ground for many of the millions of illegal migrants that Europe doesn't want. In response, Starmer rejected those claims as embarrassing nonsense. Regardless, a migration deal isn't the only thing that Keir Starmer's been talking about. At a meeting of centre-left leaders in Montreal, Canada, Starmer said that a Labour government would seek a major rewrite of the existing Brexit deal with the EU, saying that almost everyone recognises that the deal Johnson struck is not a good one. It's far too thin. As we go into 2025, we'll attempt to get a much better deal for the UK, adding, I do think that we can have a closer trading relationship as well. Now, negotiating changes to the Brexit deal would be a big move, so it's worth exploring how Labour would actually plan to do this and whether it's really all that plausible. The first thing worth noting is that the deal, officially the EU-UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement, is due for review in 2025, which Starmer told the Financial Times is an important opportunity to reset relations. But in reality, this is where things get tricky, as it's not clear how wide-ranging that review is intended to be. According to the Financial Times, many in the EU see the 2025 review as simply a tidying up exercise, with one EU official saying that there's little appetite to reopen the Brexit psychodrama in Brussels. In fact, a European Commission Vice President said earlier this year that the review does not constitute a commitment to reopen the TCA or renegotiate the supplementary agreements. Therefore, if Starmer wants to secure considerable changes, then his government will have to offer quite strong incentives to the EU, at least according to the UK and a Changing Europe research network. One thing that's for certain, though, is that it's unlikely that Starmer will be able to achieve a quick win on a better Brexit deal. As we've said, there's little appetite in Brussels to reopen the can of worms that is Brexit, especially as, for the EU, priorities have shifted significantly, and there's no longer the looming threat of a no deal to bring about urgency. Plus, Starmer's stated red lines of no customs union and no single market also limit what he might be able to achieve. That being said, there are certainly other steps that Starmer could take to increase UK-EU cooperation. For example, rejoining the Erasmus Plus student exchange scheme, striking a deal to enable touring musicians easier travel on the continent, or rejoining the EU's nuclear research programme. On a bigger scale, there's also the potential for greater UK-EU security cooperation, something that Labour's Shadow Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, has called for. What's clear, though, is that Labour is obviously hoping that they can enter power having already laid the groundwork for good EU relations with a view to change things. This was evident in Starmer's recent visit to Europol in The Hague and his personal meeting with Emmanuel Macron in Paris. And if negotiations with the EU are going to be as tricky as many analysts suggest, then starting from a place of goodwill and clear intentions can only be a good thing. Although maybe Starmer could still do with some more negotiating help just beyond making friends. And perhaps he could even benefit from checking out Imprint's course, Never Split the Difference, based on the immensely popular book of the same name. And that's not the only course he could learn from either. Just like TLDR, Imprint is all about helping you learn quickly, conveniently, and visually. It's super quick because most of their lessons take less than 2 minutes to complete, summarizing knowledge from all kinds of topics and using Harvard professors and best-selling authors to teach you key concepts. It's convenient because it's all housed in their easy-to-use mobile app, letting you replace doom scrolling with actual learning. And it's visual because, well, look at it. Their animated explanations help you stay focused, understand concepts quickly, and actually retain what you learn. So join the millions of users learning with Imprint, including me. I'm taking their multi-day flow course right now. And do that by using the link in the description. Plus, if you use that link, you'll get a 7-day free trial and get 20% off an annual plan when you sign up. And they'll know that you came from us. So check out Imprint, support our new sponsor, and thanks for watching TLDR.